Alright, so the beloved Z125. Um, I ended up buying the TB parts clutch kit and light and primary gear after some research during my morning coffee. And um, kind of a firm believer that like upgrades are all about tires and suspension, where most people think it's all about exhaust and a tune. But that's just me. I did want to get some other cheap upgrades in because honestly, I got these Z125s, and I absolutely hated the clutch. It just felt like there was nothing there, and I'm used to having a very stiff clutch pull, and I had to change that, and I was pleasantly delighted to see that the upgrade is only like 20-30 bucks, which most clutch packs are way more than that for your modern bike, I should say. So that was a nice surprise. And then I found out about this primary gear. Um, these are the old springs, but this primary gear. While I was looking at the clutch plate, and I was like, well, if you're going to be in there and you're going to replace the gasket and drain the oil, why not do both? And I read a lot of, like, I don't know if mixed emotions is the right term, but a lot of, like, is it worth it, yes or no, type of responses for the primary gear. And I've only put about 30 minutes on the bike since I've done it. But I'm going to, at the end of this video, there will be another segment that gives my kind of opinion on, is it worth the 60 or 70 bucks to get the primary gear? Because we're going to go ride them here this morning. It's a nice Saturday morning in Phoenix, so we'll get some time in on them. But anyway, I did want to show just quickly what I got out to do this job. So that's going to be the next upgrade this weekend. I got my Racing Brothers fork internals yesterday, or maybe the day before. But I forgot to order the fork seals. So the fork seals will actually be here today, and I'll probably knock this out this weekend. But as for what you need to do this job, you got to drain the oil. You need a 112 oil filter, which it's actually a really cheap oil filter. It's like a $5 oil filter. I like this Lucas. I actually ran semi or part synthetic. I usually run full, but because I'll probably be changing the oil on this bike fairly regularly, I don't really mind. I'll save my synthetic for something else. You need the gear. So this is the OEM gear that comes out of it. If you need the clutch, or if you need the clutch pack, you obviously need the clutch pack. And in the clutch pack for, again, 20-30 bucks, it comes with the steel plates, the friction plates, springs, and the bolts that go on the pressure plate. So in my opinion, you're getting quite a bit for 25-30 bucks, which is cool. And then this is going to be the commonly overlooked item, is you need the clutch cover gasket. Could you reuse it? Probably. I don't suggest that, and typically I don't do work like that. I don't think that's the right way to do it. It's not really a money thing for most people. It's more of like, oh crap, I forgot to get this, and I don't want to wait to get it. So just do your due diligence and get the gasket. I have never dealt with this company before. The guy's name is Brian, who I spoke with. And from what I'm gathering, the Zeds and the Groms are, or I should say, a good place to go for that stuff is Man in the Box. Is kind of what I'm gathering on the forums and online. And I don't have a problem with them, never dealt with them before. But I was able to talk to Brian and get these parts a little bit cheaper with him. And honestly, he just seems like a really down-to-earth, reasonable guy. And in this world, those are the types of people that I like to interact with. So if you're going to pick up the phone and talk to me like a human, you're going to get my business, and that's just kind of how I operate. As for tools, you really don't need much to do this. You don't even need this T-handle, but you do need a 1/4 inch, or you should have a 1/4 inch 8mm. I don't think it needs to be a deep, but a deep socket will be more helpful. 3/8 drive, 1/4 inch drive. The extension makes it easier when you're getting to the oil filter and the side or the case cover. You need a 19 for the two nuts, one for the clutch and one for the primary gear. Both are a 19. Actually, you should probably have an impact. I highly recommend using a battery operated one and not a pneumatic one, because these components are very small and you don't want to break anything. The 12 is for the right peg bracket. Just moving that out of your way makes life a little bit easier. And then I have these vice grips out because while you're doing this, again, it's kind of an all-in-one thing. Do your oil filter, do it all together. But I have those out. This is not the bike I did it on the red one. Because while you have the clutch cable off at the lower end, just pull it off here and lube it. So you're getting a freshly lubed cable, fresh clutch springs, fresh clutch pack, fresh oil. You know, I'll go more into detail on did I feel a difference here in a little bit, but the answer in short is it's definitely different. Is it a million times better? I think that just strictly depends on who you are and how you ride. But in short, I like it better than the stock configuration. Here's the other end of the cable. Oh, I'm sorry, you need a 12 millimeter wrench for these two nuts right here, but you back these off, move that out, this will come out, and then you have the cable separated from the cover. You don't have to worry about any of this, this all stays intact. All of these 8 millimeter bolts are exactly the same bolt, so you don't even have to worry about keeping these in order. They're all the same. You need to remove this connection from these prongs here when you separate the case cover. Don't forget to do that or you're going to be tugging here. And then when you put it back together, remember to put that back together. And these are the two 12 millimeter bolts to get this to come out of your way. There's two springs, one for the return on the brake pedal and one for the brake light activation back here. So, I mean, you snap a picture, just remember it's pretty simple, but you got to be aware of what's going on over here, because I'm sure it's easy to get these disconnected or off their hook, and then your brake light's not going to work, and then you're going to be wondering why. But again, you'll figure it out. It's really pretty intuitive. And then I removed this, obviously, to make it a little bit easier. But anyway, it's a good start. I'll have more on this and more feedback here in a moment. Alright, today I'm messing with one of the Z125s that we recently acquired. Came across a couple pretty good deals, so we picked up a red one and we picked up a green one. They're both 2018s, like new, under 1,000 miles. Both came with this awesome 12 o'clock bar from Impact Tech and a couple of other goodies. But anyway, I have thought about what I wanted to accomplish for first order of business, and I have decided to go with a clutch pack from TV Parts and the lighter primary gear from TV Parts. That apparently saves you almost a couple pounds of rotational mass. So this is your Kawasaki OEM one, which I've already kind of wiggled out, but I'll get to that in a second. And this is your TV Parts one. The clutch kit comes with stiffer springs and new bolts that will replace these guys right here. And then I have the friction discs and the steel plates soaking in oil right now. So anyway, in order to accomplish this, more or less, you want to obviously drain the oil, but it's easier if you take this nose guard or shroud off first. It's 5 millimeter Allen bolts. The one on the right side on the top actually has like a collar behind it, and it's the longer bolt, so that's the one that's on the right side on the top. It's already been removed in this case. You'll drain the engine oil from underneath here on the left side, and then the oil filter cover will pop off from down here in the front, and you'll have a spring and a gasket here that will need to be accounted for if you're replacing the oil. And that's two 8 millimeter bolts. So drain the oil filter cover, this shroud. I'd let the bike warm up a little bit before you started the job. And then once your oil has been drained, you can remove the side cover. So this is pretty straightforward. First order of business, I removed the right rear set just to make life a little bit easier to get better access in here. And then you have to remove the clutch cable. or you'd have to let it dangle, which I don't suggest doing. So there's a good reason or good time to lube your clutch cable if you haven't done that in a while. But just back all these off, and this fits into the case cover. Pretty self-explanatory. And then when you get to here, um, recognize you have two dowels in these two positions right here. Don't lose those. Shouldn't need to replace them with the bike being so new, unless you start hammering away on something. It's not really a cost factor. It's more of a do I have these dowels or not factor, and you don't want to wait on them. When the cover comes off, you have to be aware that this oil strainer goes down here, screen goes down here, and comes out accordingly. You can't lose that guy. And then there's a gasket on the opposite side of the cover. So, you know, this one's not in bad shape. I don't like to reuse these gaskets. I pretty much never do unless the customer says they don't want to pay for a new gasket. This is my bike, so I'm definitely going to replace this gasket for the $5, $6, $7 that it costs. So, yeah. That being said, you get to this point and you have all your parts lined up on the bench. And as for the order I loosen things in, I broke these loose first. That way I'm not really fighting it later. And then this will come out without removing the clutch pack, but you have to kind of jiggle both at the same time to loosen them up. So this guy will come out accordingly. There's nothing to retain on this gear. It is one just solid piece. There's no thrust washers or clips or anything like that that go in here. So your primary gear, or your new primary gear, will go on here, and you just have to verify all the teeth line up. And then you'll break all these loose, and you'll put your new clutch pack in if you chose to do that. And more on that in a moment. Alright, so I would definitely recommend not using power tools on the majority of this. I mean, if anything, you need the 19mm to get this nut off. That holds the primary gear in. That you're probably going to need an impact for, but you know, the pressure plate, all this in here is very, very delicate, small components, and I would just be very, very gentle with it. Much smaller than your typical motorcycle components. I'm just checking this bearing, which it is smooth. I don't hear any noises, nothing crazy here. I'll probably just run this through the parts washer and clean it. And the cool thing about the kit is it actually comes with these screws, which is kind of nice. Usually you don't get the screws from what I've seen. So anyway, we'll take these springs out here. Alright, so a couple things here. I wanted to show Bulletproof Cycles website. He's got a bunch of good stuff here for sale for the Z125, and ultimately this is where I purchased my parts from. I was actually going to go with the Olens until I read about Racing Brothers, but anyway, we'll see how that goes. As for removing the clutch pack itself, it's always good to have a couple things in front of you, and those being the parts diagram and the manual. Even if I've done a job 5 times, I always have these two items in front of me just to verify I'm doing things properly for the customer. You know, better safe than sorry. But if you look at this parts diagram, a couple small details regarding once you get the clutch pack out. This is the front here. So the right side of the bike is over here. If you notice, these friction plates are different than the ones on the end. So when you buy the clutch kit, all 5 friction discs look like the ones on the end, and not like the stock OEM ones in the middle. But friction to the outside. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. You just got to pay attention to this guy up here, and then there are a couple of details in the manual
that you'll want to be aware of. So this direction is important, and it has to be installed the correct way on these friction plates. So again, the OEM ones in the middle are like this, and all 5 of your new ones in the kit are like this, and this has to be oriented a certain way. So make sure you install those correctly. The other detail is that the last friction plate sits in this groove, and by last I mean outermost friction plate. It's different in that it sits in this groove right here, where the other 4 sit in this groove. The steel plates you can't mess up because they fit into the grooves on the inside. But yeah, see, here's the detail of it needs to go. It being the last friction plate needs to go into this indent right here. Here's some more inspection items, and I think that's pretty much it for details. Service limits if you want to measure the thickness of the friction pads, so on and so on. Alright, I want to finish up this video real quick just by talking about the was it worth it. Again, just in summary, I think I spent like $65 on the primary gear and $30 on the clutch, and then another 5 for the gasket. And the back and forth on the forum is it worth it? I'm just going to give my opinion. Obviously, it's just an opinion, but yeah. So here are my notes. The clutch, I think it is 100% worth it. It feels like a real clutch now on your typical modern day motorcycle. That's just something that I prefer. I didn't like basically feeling like you don't have a clutch lever on that bike, how it comes out of the crate. So, one thing I did notice is it feels different popping wheelies at first, but as soon as you get used to it, it's you pop wheelies just like you can on anything else. As soon as you know how the bike is going to respond to your inputs, but yeah, totally worth it. One thing that was notable on my Z125, the red one, was that the bike shifts a lot more smoothly now. That is the biggest complaint that I had when I got the bike was that I felt like the gearbox was probably the weakest point of the bike. And I don't know if it was the oil or this clutch kit or, I mean, who knows? Maybe it was a primary gear. That doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. The main point I'm making is the bike shifts smoother now. I'm getting a lot less neutrals in between first and second. So I'm happy about that. And finally, like the price point, I don't really think you can go wrong as long as you have the mechanical ability to do the job and you don't mess anything up while you're in there. I think it's completely worth it. So as for the primary gear, um, one thing I read online is that the bike becomes easier to stall when you're taking off from a standstill, and I did not think this was the case. I honestly did not feel any difference. Maybe my ears and my brain naturally adjusted. I don't really know, but that was not the case for me. Um, does the bike rev up more quickly? Is the throttle response improved? I think so. Again, I have the luxury of bouncing back and forth between a stock one and an improved one. It's not some huge, great upgrade, but I do think that it is different and improved over the other one. And then one thing I did want to validate is that there is a whining noise, especially when you're in first gear and starting to go up to 5,000-6,000 RPM. And kind of when you're at like maintenance throttle or idle speed in a higher gear, you do hear the whining. It's nothing big to me, but I just wanted to confirm that, yeah, it is noticeable. Um, so in summary, clutch upgrade, I'm 100% for. Primary gear, I could go either way with this. If you're absolutely trying to get every bit out of your Z, I think that you should. If you don't really care, I think that you should or could use that money towards something else. And last time I'm going to say it is, I'm a firm believer in tires and suspension. And let's say you do the Olins for 275 or the Racing Brothers for 325. If you pay $75 for this gear, that's a third to a quarter of what you would put out for a completely new, better better front end. And yeah, I know you got to like factor in oil and seals and your labor or someone else's labor, but you know, if you're tight on money, I would say you could put that money elsewhere. It's not like the advanced benefit that you get out of having a $30 clutch kit, in my opinion. So yeah, that's that. Feel free to like and subscribe, of course, and then you can always check out what we have going on, if I can spell correctly, on my website. Thanks a lot.